I got started in the Maritimes. I grew up in a very small town in New Brunswick, a long time ago, and used to listen to radio a lot, obviously long time pre-internet. In fact, a lot of families in the town that I grew up in, including my family, didn't even have cable TV, so you're talking about 2 television channels. And so radio, by contrast, you know, a lot more stations, a lot more interesting, especially once it got dark, because we were not far from the United States, and at nighttime you could hear these great TV stations from Boston and New York in particular, and I just fell in love with radio and thought to myself it would be so magical to be in that business. But I didn't know anybody in the business. There was one radio station in the next town over, about probably 10 kilometers away, and just as I was graduating from high school, I was being interviewed by a reporter for the local weekly newspaper, and I told him that when he asked, what do you want to do when you grow up? I said, I want to work in radio. And he said, I know the guy at the station in the next town. I thought, perfect, my plan is unfolding exactly the way I was hoping it would. And so I ended up getting a summer job there. I graduated on Friday, and on Monday I was in this radio station and started working as a summer student. And then all through university I was able to just get more and more interesting jobs. And I've said many times that every job I've had in this business, including the one I have now, I can draw a very direct line back to that first job at CKDH in Amherst, Nova Scotia, 3 or 4 days after high school. You know, frankly, it was a matter of chance that I was at CBC. You know, when I first tried to get into television, there were 2 TV stations in Halifax. One was CBC, one was CTV. ATV it was called at the time. And if they had offered me a job, in fact, a very good friend of mine from high school was working there at the time, is still their main anchor, Steve Murphy. If circumstances had been different and they had been the station that had offered me a job, who knows what the path would have been after that. So CBC happened to be the place that hired me, and CBC happens to be the place that I've been with the whole time. At no point did I ever say, I'm here for my entire career. And even to this day, you know, this business changes enough that you never know for sure what the next month will bring, much less the next year. So I've been incredibly fortunate. The thing about me is, yes, I spent a long time working for the same company in the same city, but my jobs have been so different. It doesn't feel to me at all like I've been doing the same thing. Just in the last few years, I was a national reporter for CBC, then I anchored a supper hour newscast, Canada Now. It got canceled, and then I was in the local news here for probably about 3 years, co-anchoring. So completely different, even though it was anchoring, it was a completely different type of job to go from an anchor of a national show to a co-anchor of a regional news program. And then I got reassigned to be a national reporter again for a couple of years. That was interesting, to go back to a job that I had years before, and you know, it was great to go back to being a national reporter with 10 more years experience than I'd had before. I felt I was much better at a lot of parts of the craft than I had been before. And then a year and a half ago was asked to do the job that I currently do, which is a live weeknight show on CBC News Network, and our big thing here is breaking news. So you talk to anybody who's an anchor in television, and they'll tell you that, ironically, the least interesting thing about television is the main part of anchoring, which is, you know, reading a teleprompter. The best part of being an anchor is when you go on air and there's no script and somebody's speaking in your ear, and you are just going live, unscripted. On this program, we've done it for hours on all kinds of stories, and it's really, really interesting to do. And you realize that on some of those big stories, you have people who are relying on your information, and you know, they get back in touch with us, and so we know that there's that kind of it's a bit of a, maybe not quite a dialogue, but it's two-way communication. You know, we're broadcasting to them, they're communicating back to us. One of the great things about my job is that you can do all kinds of different things. You know, like I've been to the last, let me think about this. Team Canada has won, the men's Olympic hockey team has won 3 gold medals since NHL players were allowed to take part in Nagano. I've been at all 3 of those games, you know, and I, for 2 of them, I was getting paid to be there. So I get to do, indulge my passion in sports generally, but hockey specifically. The other day, a country music singer may surprise some people, but Luke Bryan I'm a huge fan of, and he was coming to town, and I asked my Chase producer to track him down and see if he'd do an interview, and he came in here. I got a chance to interview him, and so that was thrilling to do. And yet on another day, all of a sudden, there is a huge story, a flood, for example, or a crime story where people, particularly in the community where it's happening, are relying on what they're seeing on TV to give them basic information about the world around them. So you go from one moment covering a hockey game or doing an interview with a singer to the next moment providing critical information to people. That's the mix I love. I could never be a full-time sports reporter, in part because I just don't have the breadth of experience. I'm a hockey fan and not a hockey player, and there are a lot of other people out there who have much greater insight into sports and what's happening in the dressing room, that sort of thing. I couldn't be an entertainment reporter. It's just not the right mix for me. Like I need to have it's a bit like a banquet, like a buffet, right? And my job is like being able to walk along that buffet table every night, and you can pick out different dishes, and most of the days on this show it's roast beef and potatoes. It's kind of the basic fare of hard news, and I love that, but it's nice to have dessert once in a while too. I very much am in the moment. That's one of the great things about this business. You come in, you figure out what's going to be on the show tonight, and then when the night's over, it's a blank slate for tomorrow. So I live and have lived throughout my career. I don't even really do documentaries or kind of those projects that last months in terms of researching and living with it and finally getting on the air. I've very much been, tonight I have to get this on kind of guy. So when you live in that world, you don't really think in terms of legacy. And so I don't have, unfortunately, a profound answer for that. I mean, I guess I hope that in a lot of ways, I don't know that for daily journalists or people in daily news that there is much of a legacy, that you kind of just keep throwing it out there. You're helping, you hope, build the credibility of the newscast you work on, but even then, some of the newscasts that I've worked on in the past aren't on anymore. So it's an ephemeral thing. It's kind of like that TV signal going out. By now it's maybe at the end of the solar system and moving on to the next galaxy. So the waves just dissipate, and maybe our legacy dissipates. So it's less about the legacy and more about tonight.